Hello, this is Wes at Bad Seed Games, and we're going to be picking up where we left off with the side quest of the Stretchy Bone rig that is Max compatible, Unity compatible. Alright, so before where I left off, I'd created the bone stretchy rig, and it gave a nice little approximation. However, in the interim, in the process of testing between this and then, I lost a save, so remember, save often, save early, and save often. But it's not such a big problem because at this point it's basically going ahead and reverting all these bones back to their standard none scaling, as you can see. And I also removed on these nub bones the positional constraint that was set to lock it to that point, because at this point we don't quite need it. Alright, so before we get too far, I'm going to go ahead and add in some keyframes, just that we have something nice to work with and give us a nice approximation and all that fun stuff. So just gonna move that up here, that down here, and stretch it out here. Hopefully that'll give us a nice stretch, because this is where it's gonna get interesting. So let's turn off auto key. Let's go back here. Now what I need you to do first off is we're going to create a point helper right here. Doesn't matter what it looks like, we're going to use it as a holder. So in the point 1, I want you to add in an empty attribute holder. Now if you don't know how to add them, they're in the object space they're in the transform objects, and there should be a modifier called attribute holder. Now if you're using an older version of Max, this might not be easily seen, but it should be available. There are some tutorials on how to add them in. So once we've got that in, go into the animation parameter editor, and I want you to put in on the selected object's current modifier with the attribute holder highlighted. The name of this one is going to be X multiplier. It's going to be a spinner. Add that in, and the next one's going to be YZ multiplier. Okay, now that we've got this attribute holder, just drag it over here to copy it so that we have it stashed, so we don't have to worry about entering that again. And remember, save early, save often, because one small misstep in these next few points can cause some catastrophic issues. So open up the curve editor. Let's just drag that over because we don't need the curves. Just going to pull this down here. And I want you to scroll down in the point 1. It's going to have a spot called modified object. Expand that, and you'll see attribute holder. Expand that, custom attributes. And in there, I want you to click on the X multiplier, right click on it, and click assign controller. We're going to use a controller called a float expression, and when we've got that, click on that and then go. Okay. Now that's going to bring up this expression controller system, and this is where it's going to get interesting. So I want you to put two variables, vector variables, called position 1 and position 2. So you got that? Good. Now with position 1 highlighted, click assign to controller. That'll bring up this window here. Let's just move that over here so it's easier to see. And when you click on the objects, I want you to find point 1, highlight it, and click OK. Then do the same for position 2, making it point 2. Highlight it and click OK. Alright, so now we have two variables that are vector3 variables. It's going to be extracting the position, I believe it is. And in the expression, I want you to put in length, parenthesis, position 1 minus position 2. Close it down, and click evaluate. Now if you notice in the X multiplier, that has now populated with a value called 25.351. That is the current length between this point and this point. Now the thing is, since the scaling at default for what we're going to be using is at 1. If we hook it up now, it's going to drastically alter the scale. So we need to divide that by itself. So divide it by 25.351. And then click Evaluate, and that'll give us a 1.0. Now if we scrub the timeline, you'll see that that value is going to change based on the actual amount of squash and stretch that it's based on the distance. So now that we've got that, let's close that out. And let's go into the YZ multiplier, right click, assign controller, a float expression. Let's put in position 1 as a vector variable, and position 2 as a vector variable. Now let's put in length, position 1 minus position 2 in the parenthesis. Let's assign position 1 to 0.1, OK, and position 2 to 0.2. Let's evaluate that again. We'll still get the 25.351. Right-click copy, make sure it's there, and paste that in there as what we're going to divide it as. Now, the thing is, if we evaluate it, we're going to get the same value, but we don't want to get that value, since this is going to be controlling the volumes of the squash and stretch. What we're going to do is we're going to divide 1 by the length multiplier. Now, don't worry about trying to get these evaluations down as I'm typing them in. I'll put them in the description, and from there you can then use them there. So once we click Evaluate, now if we scrub it, we're getting a different value. Okay. Alright, so now that we've got that done, what we need to do is we're going to take this attribute holder and from the empty one, copy it onto all of the other points. Alright, so let's go ahead and we'll do this. I'm going to do this one more time so I can show you what we're doing. And from there I'm just going to copy and paste and pause it in the background. So, point 2, we're now working with point 2, modified object, attribute holder, custom attributes, X multiplier, assign controller, float expression. We're adding 2 vector variables, position 1 and position 2, and the length, position 1 minus position 2. Position 1 is going to be assigned to point 2 this time, and position 2 is going to be assigned to point 3 this time. So let's evaluate that. Yep, 25.317. Let's copy that and divide the equation by that. So we get the multiplier. Alright, so now that that's done, close. YZ multiplier, float expression, position 1, vector, and position 2, vector. Again, 1 divided by, oh wait, no, length, position 1 minus position 2. Let's assign that position 1 to point 2, position 2 to point 3. Evaluate, 25.317. Let's divide that value and have 1 divided by that value. So we now have the same thing. And now I'm going to pause it here, and I'm going to do that for the rest of them, the rest of these modifiers. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've made all these the modifiers be wired up with the same equation. And as you can see, as we scrub it through, they're all changing accordingly. Now, what are we going to do with these? Well, first off, let's just get rid of that point because we don't need it anymore. I'm just going to save as, so, alright, just so that we have a starting point. Because at this point, if you've been doing something wrong, chances are Max is going to start bugging out. sure there are some better ways of actually getting around this, I bet. Alright, in order for us to actually use these modifiers to actually affect the scaling of the bones themselves, if we look in the actual motion panel, in the assign controller, the scale is controlled by a Bezier scale controller, which doesn't have an X, a Y, or a Z feature. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to replace that by highlighting the scale Bezier scale on this button, which is the assign controller, and we're going to switch it with a scale XYZ. Click OK. So we're going to do that with all the rest of the bones. So scale XYZ. Click scale XYZ. Click scale XYZ. Click scale XYZ. And click scale XYZ. You don't have to worry about the nubs. We don't need to worry about those because those are just endpoints. Alright, so now that we've got them, what are we going to do? Well, click on one of the bones, right click on it to bring up the quad menu, and down here you'll see a spot called Wire Parameters. Click on that, and that's going to bring up this option. I want you to dig into the Transform, Scale, and the X Scale, and then I want you to click on the point, and then in Modified Object, Attribute Holder, Custom Attributes, X Multiplier. Now that's going to bring up the parameter wiring. So for what we're going to do, we only needed to bring this up once. So what are we going to do with this, however, though? Since we now have a float expression that's giving us a multiplier to multiply the scale by, we're going to tell the float expression of X multiplier to control the X scale. So going one way only, connect. And let's highlight the YZ scale and the Y scale. Same again, going towards the scale, connect, here, and here. Alright, so now that when we scale and squash and when we scale it, we should have the, when we move it, we should have a squash and stretch. Alright, so now that that's done, let's click on that. Let's, just want to double check, make sure everything's good, and it looks like it's not. So we were bone 1, we're now looking at bone 4. So bone 4. Let's go up. So instead of point 1, we're now looking for point 2, modified object, attribute holder. Let's just open this up a bit more, make it a bit easier to see. Alright, so custom attributes, X multiplier for point 2 is controlling this bone, which is bone 4. X scale, Bezier float, X multiplier going towards, connect, YZ to the Y, connect, and to the Z, connect. Alright, so next bone will be bone 6. Let's expand that. Instead of point 2, we're now looking for point 3. Modified object, attribute holder, custom attributes, scale, so X to X, point 3, bone 6, yep, that's the one we want. Connect, there, connect, and there, connect. Now I'm going to pause it here and go through and do that for the rest of the bones. Alright, so I've gone ahead and I've fixed that up, and now they are all wired together. And as you can see, they are now giving a nice squash and stretch. The difference between this method, which is using the bone tools, the difference between this method and this method of using the bone tools is, now if you take a look in the curve editor, let's bring that little curve track thing back. What I want you to see now is that there is information in the scale. Where is it? as you can see by these dotted lines and these dotted curves, we now have some information in the scaling tracks that we can now export. Alright, so now that we've got that, I'm just going to save it. Just going to close that out. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create a quick little simple basic mesh. It's going to be just a basic cylinder that's deformed, so I'm just going to pause while I do that, because if you're looking at this, chances are you already know how to model, but I'm going to turn off these fins, because that's getting in the way. So, no fins. Good. Okay. Alright, so I'll be back in a few minutes after I've got a nice basic model going. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've added some more keyframes to give us a nice little envelopes, and I've also basically created just a regular quick old mesh that we can use for something in Unity. Given it some animation, as you can see, it's giving us nice squash and stretch. Now, it's kind of an ugly skinning job, and this is something that I wouldn't want to see in a game myself, but for the purposes of this video, it'll do just fine. Alright, so I've got it set up. All the bones are highlighted, ready to collapse in position, rotation, and scale. Now, we collapse, and as you can see, position, rotation, and scale are still there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a couple layers. Create a new layer. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to hide. I'm just going to click the all the bone objects, put them into this layer. Yep, they're all in there. And I'm also going to use the geometry, since that's all that I really want. I'm going to hide everything else. Still working. Alright, now that that's done, let's get Unity going. Okay, so Unity's up. Now let's go ahead. We've already collapsed all the bones and everything down. It's all animated, so I'm just going to highlight it all. Going to export selected. Let's pop that in. I'm using my main game for now, because this is the only one was up right now. So, click save. Yep. Make sure the animation's good. Okay, good. Alright, so now that that's done, let's bring this up here. Here it is. Alright. So now let's pull this up. Let's take a look at the animation. Did it transfer over properly? Well, it looks like it did, but it's certainly faster than I thought it would be. 20 frames. Let's pull the speed down. Oh yeah, because it's very fast. And as you can see, it's now got a stretchy bone system. Now the thing that you have to keep in mind, however, though, is it seems that the legacy, you can use generic, but as soon as you start doing things like, say, looping the pose or anything else like that, it'll kind of muss up a bit and give you some untoward effect. I've noticed that the legacy system is a system that you'd want to use for this. So apply there, and let's put that in there so we can preview it. It's not pretty, but it's doing what we need it to. You can even go once to loop it, or even ping pong. And I have tested this in an actual game environment, and this does actually work. So if you wanted to see about getting a stretchy bone system to work with Unity, even though so many people keep saying, oh, don't bother working with stretchy bones, you won't be able to use it. It works. And it's actually pretty impressive. The only thing you do have to keep in mind, however, though, is that the hierarchy is going to be treating all of the bones as separate objects. So if you wanted to incorporate that into the arm, you're going to have the shoulder bone be the main, basically going to have them all sitting there and constrained. You're going to have to come up with some interesting rigging solutions for that. And it's not going to be it's not going to be problematic. Like if you've already got experience with rigging, you should be pretty much in your element. But if you wanted a stretchy character in Unity, you can do it. So many people say you can't. With Unity, you can. Alright, so I hope that wraps up everything on this side quest. And if you like what I've got going, feel free to comment and rate it however you like. And if you want to subscribe, that'd be awesome too. But other than that, I'll catch you later, and hope you have a great one. Bye.